Thanks to Miss Budnut and Unknown Resistor for helping with the funding for this video. If you'd like to get your own special shoutouts, early access to videos, or other perks, consider supporting the channel via Patreon, Ko-fi, or channel memberships. You'll find the links in the description and the pinned comment of this video. Your contributions will greatly help boost the speed, production, and quality of future videos to come. Thank you, and enjoy. A while back, I decided to check out some Disney movies that just about everyone would call nostalgia classics. Except for me. But you know, since then I thought it would be quite the experience going through movies that a lot of you fellas might have grown up with, or at least seen a while back. I mean, you fellas may have had your own experience by now, and you've been talking about for a while, and you know a lot about what's been going on, and then you got me here with a lot less to know about those similar movies, and sharing some more modern takes. But instead of going back to the Disney realm right away, I figured I'd take a crack at another studio for the time being. DreamWorks. But hey, just like with Disney, there's still a fair handful of their movies I've seen before too. By now, most of you remember a while ago when I reviewed Puss in Boots, and even still, there's quite a handful of other products I've seen from the studio throughout my childhood. I've gone through the Shrek stuff, and some of Madagascar, a small sample of the Aardman collab, and even a few one-offs like Over the Hedge, Bee Movie, and, you know, I'm even willing to call Shark Tale a guilty pleasure.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
And even still, there are plenty of other titles I've never considered touching up until now. So I decided to finally give some of them a shot. And I thought 2026 would be the best time to get out of the way, considering the studio's close to unleashing their Shroud of Nightmares next year. Oh god, no. So I brisked through the studio's timeline and found a random but fair sample of their movies, ranging from some of their older stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s, and even some choices from a few years ago. I may have spent a lot of time avoiding them for one reason or another, but now's the chance to broaden my time with this material and see what they had to offer over the decades. So let's start this next journey. This marathon starts off with the longest and bigger of examples that drew me in for this, the Kung Fu Panda movies. The first movie in the bunch was released way back in 2008, and despite being just around the right age for it, I still somewhat had my doubts about it back then. I guess it was because some parts of my family had a bit of a hardcore adoration for real pandas, and we didn't really think this captured their cute side that well back then, or something like that. But as the years went by, I started pushing away from this beyond weird thought, and now I finally gained the curiosity to go into it. And I gotta say, this was actually a pretty good start to the whole thing. While the beginning setup might not be entirely unique, it still gave a fairly stable setup for Po and his personality, with him starting off feeling like a nobody and stuck to helping out with the family business, building up to him going through his new experiences and proving his worth after being appointed as the next dragon warrior, and all while trying to continue proving himself to Shifu and the other animals, the Furious Five, who all try to get accustomed to this new team member. And sure, the names of the Furious Five themselves might not be the most creative, but at least they have decently written personalities to help them stand out on their own, and just as smart a choice of voice casting for them, including, but not limited to, David Cross, Lucy Liu, Angelina Jolie, and even the great Jackie Chan.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Don't nobody understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, man.
And of course we all know about Po being voiced by Jack Black.
Chicken jockey.
Aside from them, the other cast members I recognized right off the bat were Ian McShane as the villain Tai Lung and James Hong as Ping.
We've been waiting here. Now I know we were ahead of that guy. He just came in.
You are almost ready to be entrusted with the secret ingredient of my secret ingredient soup. And then you will fulfill your destiny and take over the restaurant.
A lot of doubt in the main character becoming one of the big fellows also builds up a big step in the plot, all leading up to bonds between each other that everyone recognizes today. And you know, as long as the pacing's decent on it and still provides something to help it memorable in a good way, sometimes those are all that really matter. And in this movie, I'd say it had a solid handle on that too. There was a decent time frame between all the doubt and conflict toward Po, and all setting up to the message with the Dragon Scroll, and still laying out enough space for the big final battle.
You're just a big, fat panda.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
And even still having more space for some conflict between characters in the later movies. It also helped with the pacing, seeing Po slowly find his own path as he strays away from Ping's noodle restaurant, and slowly earning his title and glory through all the hardships, arguments, and pain he put himself through in this short amount of time. In some ways, I can see this arc as encouragement for those who've seen this when it was new, especially those like Poe who might have to deal with a small dead-end job or might be stuck in a place with nothing going on in their lives and craving to get something more. As for the villain, while I was familiar with Tai Lung, or at least visually, I have no idea why, but for some reason I was under this weird impression he was going to be the villain in the third movie. But regardless, it was still great to finally see him in literal action, just to see what he was capable of outside of the many memes I've seen on different websites. And as for what he offered in the movie, he had an unusual, but still fitting balance on what to expect for some parts of the villains in the fights in later movies, showing a strong, menacing side to him sometimes, all while showing some flaws and some quick amusing moments to him. Though I'm sure some may question the direction of morality put on Tai Lung, seeing how he was expected to be the Dragon Warrior by mistake, only for him to go insane after the years he spent training for it and losing it all in the end. And for that matter, Oogway might come off having confusing ways about his decisions and prophecies if you're a fresh new first-time watcher for the first movie like I was. Like for a starting impression, I'm sure there are some who might have still wondered about some snippets about Oogway's visions, and after seeing everything Tai Lung went through, they might have asked stuff like, "Don't you think Oogway would have applied a slight sign of caution to make sure something like that wouldn't happen again with the next potential Dragon Warrior?" Yeah, even though we foretold Tai Lung escaping, he still had full trust in Poe right from the start. But as for me, I can see where Oogway saw all this coming into play, and that's all further boosted by some details we see in the later movies. And still, even if his ways didn't always make sense, at least he left us all off with great wisdom and metaphors and lessons on this adventure to help with the layering of the narrative. While it may not have been perfectly structured, it still gave a unique, stable, and entertaining start to these movies, along with a memorable introduction to the characters through smooth, clear animation in different styles, and a balance of pretty amusing jokes and noble interactions to help them stand out more. So after all of this in the first installment alone, I can understand why many would want to come back for what was to arrive next. We jump a little ahead to 2011, and they returned in Kung Fu Panda 2. Going into this one, I've known there are quite a few people who've said this one was supposedly a lot better than the first, and maybe even the peak of the series. And while I'm still considering that take myself for now, at the very least I can see a lot of where they're coming from. The main highlight here is the whole reveal to the story of Poe and his family. Based on what was shown, he had a lot more going on than we may have thought from before, especially seeing the hardships he had to witness at such a young age. This also shows Ping having way more of a heart than we all thought at first, taking Poe in as a baby after all his tragedies and doing what he can to raise him and provide him safety.
You're adopted!
He might have just been a handful of goofy lines and moments in the first movie, but here they show he had a far kinder side than expected, and that helped show what he was capable of as his own character, and for the whole narrative up to this point. And man, it's surprisingly touching. This also plays into some of the smaller jokes and moments that give off a surprising boost. They might seem quirky at first, but after some thought, it might start to feel like Poe's trying to shake off the trauma he keeps going back to, but realizes it's not as easy as he may have thought. And this follows him to the point of discovering inner peace and acceptance, which, like in the last movie, is another big aspect I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, and on a far deeper level this time. It's displayed through Poe and his friends around him, further raising the feel and heft of him and these characters. And this time, Shen was the big baddie they all had to encounter. It was great on its own they had Gary Oldman for the character, and Shen himself had a lot going on with him too. Even with his limit of fists up, or lack of fists at all for that matter, he had some decent substance to him that still helped him balance out, nay, outdid Tai Lung in some ways. He came off as a powerful threat with his wolf army and load of explosives, starting out with fireworks and building up to these big-ass cannons. The darkness over him is also hinted at with some blurbs in his family line, showing how a lot of this started with Shen getting the boot and leading up to him taking over and eventually destroying a handful of property that once belonged to them. But when you think about it, can it come off petty? I guess in some ways, but there are also signs that he shows guilt for all this. But he also feels it's too late for him to do anything. Whether it's putting an abrupt stop to all this, or trying to slowly change his ways just like that. Not just here, but also going back to his attack on the pandas and Poe's mom from way back then. This feeling takes over more and more over time, which later brings him to the point of no return, even when Poe tries to give him a chance to fix himself in the end. As for slight criticisms I might have had on this, well, I can understand why Shifu didn't tag along on this journey, but I still kinda wish they gave him a little story arc of his own in between. You know, just something for him to do, so the kids would have more of a reminder that he's still way back there and expecting his students' return. And his own story could have gone different directions to fit in with all this. Maybe he's dealing with his own frustrations and concerns while all this is going on. Or maybe they could do something more lighthearted, or maybe something of that ilk. Still, this was a pretty great sequel, providing way more than I'm sure anyone may have expected. Adding some strong layering to Poe and cementing his character traits for what was to come around for him and the others in the future. Despite the bigger time jump with this one, there was a much clearer shot at seeing a third movie coming out, especially from that brief cliffhanger with Lee at the end of the second one, which it finally followed through with in 2016. After everything he's encountered and the ways he's improved over a short time span, Poe's taking his steps to become the next instructor, and just in time to take on the next big foe, General Kai, voiced by J.K. Simmons, who again you'll certainly recognize through some of his iconic TV and movie characters.
You serious?
While Kai himself had a great choice for voice actor and a few other details going for him, there was still a little something that he was lacking in that the other villains had: a structured motive. Sure, it may not be anything too bad in the long run, but after the extra miles these writers took at providing backstory to the earlier villains and the motives behind everything, I can understand that it would kinda make Kai feel a little less stable by comparison for some. But the good news is that he had plenty of other details to help balance that out. The skills he boosted during his time in the spirit world made him enough of a fairly decent enemy on his own, especially as he shows them off stealing the chi of various fighters and using their bodies to expand his army. Like, jeez. And again, this journey goes further with an extra boost from Poe's rediscovered dad Lee, who it looks like was originally planned to be voiced by Fred Tatasciore, but instead they had the role filled here by the Bryan Cranston, who by now everyone likely knows through Walter White.
I watched your mama die.
Along with their reconnection, Poe meets all the other pandas from their village, which I can see some substance in that too, as it possibly shows alternate outcomes, both with highs and lows of how Poe could have turned out, had Shen not interfered. So I guess make of that what you will. And this also helps Tigress develop a bit more toward Poe and the kind of life he's been accustomed to, which in a way feels poetic to the earlier movies, looking back on how she was more aggressive toward him and the others at first, and then being very open to lending an ear to his issues in the second movie. And now here she is helping aid him for his big fight in this movie too. She also kinda helped as someone for Poe to have on his side when he felt betrayed by Lee later. Which, yeah, Lee was wrong for lying to him all this time, but his reasoning does make a bit of sense here after Poe lost his mom too. And still, it all led to a big reconciliation between all the pandas, teaming up to bring down Kai, sparing their care for Poe to bring him back from the spirit world, and Poe finally unleashing his true dragon warrior side, letting out all the experience he's had all this time and presenting the value behind it all. And because of that, this had a huge sense of finality to it throughout. Whether it was the shot of Kai wiping out the Jade Palace, thus potentially signifying the end of the place where they all bonded and learned a lot from each other at the time, or maybe with the whole plotline about Poe rising up from his Dragon Warrior status to really being the next master in line, proving his worth throughout the adventure and fights he encountered within, and successfully ending his potential story arc that all three movies might have been secretly building up over time. Seeing it in that sense, it all feels kinda nice for closure, seeing how far Poe's gone and fulfilling what was set for him. So yeah, this had a pretty beautiful structured ending, and it works pretty well as a wrap up to the trilogy, and I'm sure they wouldn't attempt to throw in random extra details for the sake of unnecessarily pumping out a fourth installment down the road. Oh yes they did, oh my god! So the fourth installment came out in 2024, and well, okay, I'd say this movie's outcome was mostly similar to the Toy Story series. The fourth one wasn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, it really did not feel as strong as the earlier ones either. They leaned toward Poe becoming a spiritual leader, as was suddenly decided by Shifu, it seems. Like, well, was this planned by Oogway, or was this randomly decided by Shifu himself? I guess he felt Poe was ready, though sure, he did show a lot of what he could do in the earlier movies, but what exactly has he done to show he's ready to go past his Dragon Warrior master status? Well, anyway, because of this sudden news, Poe's gotta find a successor now, which honestly, I pray they're not gonna use this to flatly rehash the narrative to start all over, because I know they're eventually gonna keep this going with a 5th movie too. So let's hope for now they come up with something different, or at least a little interesting with him and Zen, his eventual successor. Speaking of which, you'd think Poe might ask for a little insight or some tips from the Furious Five over something as potentially drastic as finding his successor, and yet they were just bumped out of the whole story, doing their own stuff while Poe's going only with Zen all that time. I guess this was their way of cutting corners in the budget to bring in Awkwafina and Mr. Beast as I live and breathe.
Gadoosh.
Fantastic pose.
You don't like Crunch Bars? I do like Crunch Bars, but again, it's too sweet. Let me try this. Maybe these are defective. Oh my god, this tastes good to me.
And this time, they also took a different approach for the villain. Instead of someone with a load of strength or weapons, we had something a little new with the Chameleon, an enchantress who specialized with shapeshifting. It might sound promising at first, but it later starts to feel like the Chameleon was built up from poorly structured lore. Like she said she was completely denied kung fu training for just being too small? I'm sorry, where and when was this rule established?
I was turned away from every training hall I went to. They would say I was too small.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you?
She was supposedly greatly shunned, but then we have smaller animals who were able to train like Viper, Mantis, Shifu, who ends up becoming a master? I can't tell if this is just poor origin location on Chameleon's end, or maybe the writer's just not thinking that far about the motives. Because by comparison, the whole small factor just seems kinda ridiculous. And there are also some possible signs of low self-esteem coming from her, especially given how much the Chameleon basically had to depend on the other villains before her. Even the final battle never really lived up to its build-up that much. Unless maybe you'd want to see Poe fighting a giant hybrid of different animals, or perhaps an evil version of himself, and I guess a few brief action shots and moves that looked fairly decent. Otherwise, there isn't as much to this fight as we'd probably hope for. After everything the previous movies offered, with the characters and their layering to the heft and decisions and effect from them, and the other aspects in between, this one just felt far flimsier in the end. Like, yeah, they tried to keep those going too, but there just wasn't enough weight to help them stand this time. But, you know, even with the bigger handful of issues this movie gave off, especially when stacked up to the other 3 movies, I'm still hoping they learned a little from these mistakes when the 5th one comes around. Next, we've got an older staple of the studio's legacy, and a 2D animated staple at that. The Road to El Dorado. I guess I was too young to understand this kind of narrative or humor or whatever back when it was still new, because for the longest time, I never really felt that much of a desire to see it for myself. And even in recent years, I'll admit I had my doubts at first. I started brisking through a few different ratings, which mostly seemed hit or miss on the surface level, and it didn't help hearing that this movie flopped in the box office during its time. Like, ouch! Not good! But hey, there ended up being plenty of great movies out there that had similar fates, so yeah, I'll say that's definitely on me for letting it hold me back. But despite what it might have had going against it, this one was actually a more pleasant time than I thought. There's quite a surprising load in the details that work amazing off each other, whether it's the flowing animation of the characters and backgrounds together, or the spot-on performances of Kenneth Branagh and Calvin Klein for Miguel and Tulio, and maybe you'd enjoy some of the smaller elements too, like the quick-paced jokes or the songs. Yeah, you may know by now I'm quite a musical fan myself, and these songs were great too. Even better that they were brought to us by Tim Rice and even Elton John. Whew, good choices there. So basically, these witty crooks Tulio and Miguel were hoping their search for El Dorado and its gold will change their lives for the better. But little did they expect that the real El Dorado was the friends they made along the way. No, just kidding, they found it. Although from there, most of the remaining story follows the old spiel of citizens of an area believing random newcomers are these huge superheroes, titans, or some kind of big shot, only for them to play along until it starts going too far. We may have seen this kind of scenario heavily played out in plenty of other shows and movies, so most of the story can be a little predictable as a result. But hey, there's still all those other details in the presentation and narrative that help balance it out. Whether it's the soundtrack, the visuals, or the memorable funny interactions between Miguel, Tulio, and or their surroundings. And speaking of, it's also kinda interesting seeing the different routes Tulio and Miguel take with their new positions and how they sorta do a 180 in some ways. Especially with Miguel, as he wanted to go there just for the gold at first, but over time started caring for the people and wanting to stick around. And there's Tulio, who didn't have as much motivation himself outside of the gold either. That is, until he met Chell. Yeah, she's pretty cool too, and pretty helpful in a lot of different ways. Stop it! Though the main criticism I have of this movie is some of the areas in pacing and how it can get notably wonky in a few scenes too. Sometimes it feels like they're just adding details to fill in the time frame, which of course can be fine on its own, but then other times it feels like they're reeling back on other details to save space for the time frame too. Like some scenes might go a bit longer than they probably should, while a few others were rushed through a bit more than they probably should have, and sometimes they'll just make the whole mood feel uneasy or confusing as you watch through it. But still, it didn't affect the experience too much, I'd say, and despite that, it had plenty more to like than I would have expected. Yeah, it's still a shame it never did that well in the theaters back then, but with all the energy that this had for the production and presentation, this comes off with a fun execution on a level that I'm sure a lot of you fondly look back on if you saw it growing up to yourself. And as for me, I can see myself rewatching this a few times down the road whenever I find a chance to. Like, I don't know if I'll get to right away, but I do plan to go through this at least one more time to regain that unique charm it had.
Look on the positive side of these things can't get...
Excuse me, were you going to say worse?
No.
No? No. You sure?
Absolutely not.
Now, Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken might not be as exciting of a choice I had in this bundle, as this was one of the more recent picks, and it didn't seem to do so hot in the theaters.
Surprise! It's a bomb!
Oh, look at that! This turned into a bigger flop than Road to El Dorado! So anyway, I may have been on the fence about this one during its theater run, and obviously turned it down in the end, but of course I still had a bit of interest after all this time regardless. And I'll be honest, some of the biggest reasons why I was curious enough to check out this movie for this video was the energy and voice performance and the animation shown in some of these characters, as well as the admittedly kinda cute design some even had overall. And to put it simply, that's probably the best thing I can say about this movie, that it's mostly cute. Some of the characters had cute designs, the premise was cute, there were some cute visual gags, the execution may have been cute in some ways too, and even the plans for advertising were cute, but not exactly in a good way. And I think that was one of the biggest problems here. This movie was the kind of case where just about everything was spelled out in the trailers, and they basically left little to nothing for the satisfaction in audience reactions. But even putting that aside, what happens in the movie just gave off a kind of story. Basically, Ruby's friends are trying to help her get ready for the prom.
Come on, Ruby, do it.
Do it.
Do it! Just do it!
And at the same time, she learns the female side of her family can turn to giant krakens when they go into the ocean. Okay, a rather specific rule, I guess, but I can see how that works. But then Ruby turns into a kraken form, like, when she's at the library, which is not in the ocean. So, how did that happen? Is it partially an emotional thing too, or what's up with that? And on the side, it looks like the citizens here are having this belief that all Canadians are blue now. But to be fair, this whole plot of Ruby discovering her kraken side, albeit not too sturdy, does have a pretty nice point to it, as it looks like it's building up to that old coming-of-age story trope. You know, where a character goes through changes and has to learn to accept them over time. Kinda like the narrative you'd see in something like The Lion King, or for more direct examples, Turning Red or Inside Out 2. While this kind of narrative can lead to some pretty great executions in movies like those, it ends up feeling like the direction was more confused this time. Sure, there was some different thought put into it, like there may have been some details trying to mislead the audience for surprise twists, like setting up Captain Gordon to look like he'd be the villain, only for Chelsea or Narissa to really be the villain, although I'm sure a lot of you saw that coming in the end anyway. But again, this was mostly just an alright movie. Of course, it may not have had that big an impression, being released shortly after something as deep and heavy as Puss in Boots' Last Wish, but there was still some pretty great effort overall put into this. I think. Yeah, it may not have turned out amazing or anything, but thinking back to a few other particular movies, I think it's fair to say this is not the worst they gave us. But even with the handful of positives this movie may have had, I unfortunately still have my doubts it'll be enough for us to see anything from these characters or this narrative anytime soon. Abominable, on the other hand, is a kind of movie that I've not only skipped out on during its theatrical run, but also, I have to admit I forgot it even existed for the longest time. But I was suggested to check it out for this video, though at first I was completely lost after reading the comment. After finding it, all I could think was, wait, Abominable? Is that a thing? Is that something they made? What you talking about?
What you talking about?
But now that I found it after all this time, I can say that this was absolutely, positively okay. Just okay. It was doable, I guess. I will say for a start, the way this setting and narrative is set up offers enough to gain some possible interest. If Everest's breakout was somehow not enough to grab your attention, then perhaps you might have a bit more focus on Yi as they establish her character here and over time later on, starting with her goal to see the Himalayas to fulfill the goal her late dad set. And that's only the first sign of a rather touching atmosphere that comes off of Yi, not only thinking back to the life she and her dad could have had together, but also expressing herself for some brief violin solos. And I have to say, on a personal level, the first few scenes of her meeting Everest and showing care for him kinda brought back some memories from when I first found my cat Cupcake long ago, and it brought me back to a lot of moments we shared during her life. So yeah, plenty of hits in the feels for a start here. And I guess in some ways reaching out like that would be enough to get people interested in where this is gonna go. Also, while not as strongly connected, I kind of feel Everest's endearing side also has a few similarities between Ludo from Labyrinth. And above all else, it's displayed showing how much he wants to go back to the Himalayas and see his family. And there are also some really nice details provided in the animation and character designs along with the narrative, but I still found a few criticisms here too. Like in many instances, I was a little confused by Everest's power. Yeah, it looks really appealing and can be helpful in some scenes, though I feel it can be helpful in other scenes, albeit it's never really applied. I guess it would have been a little more interesting had they established more rules to Everest's magic, instead of, assuming it's based on morality, whimsy, or whatever they were going off of. Like, sure, we learn he knows some things about camouflage, especially on the mountain, but what about some of his other skills? Like, is he too young to understand his presumed magic potential? Will he ever be able to do more? Does he even know how? Will I have to watch the Invisible City series to get these answers? Like, come on, Everest, give us a hint or something. Oh. Huh. Well, I guess that makes sense. Sure. And we have Zora, the twist villain, who was also kinda iffy. Like, I may not have known what they were exactly going for with her at first, but now seeing she was secretly just a poacher was kinda flat in the end. I mean, sure, I guess the motive can make a little sense given the position and atmosphere she had, but nothing really comes out of her otherwise despite the build-up. Heck, even Burnish had a lot more going on with him by comparison, and that guy was just straight up misguided the whole time. But, even with these issues, this was still a fairly decent movie with some nice details in between. Some pretty looking scenes, some fairly decent representation, some likable characters on differing levels. But I'm glad to have seen this at least once after so long. Oh yeah, and James Hong was in this movie too. Neat. Fancy that. Okay, so I'm kinda cheating with this next one, but Megamind was a movie I started watching years ago and never finished. On my first chance, I only ever got to Megamind's big fight with Metro Man, and through all that time, I never got to see how it actually ended. The fight in general, the movie as a whole, all of it was a blank slate, a total mystery. Well, mostly. I may have never known how exactly it was going to end up until now, but I mostly just assumed how the rest of the story would play out based on the many posts I've seen with all the memes created throughout the years. Not only that, but somewhere in between I stumbled upon Dr. Horrible. I thought it seemed very similar to Megamind at the time, and I guess it was enough for me to assume they were going to play out basically the same back then. And yeah, they may have been very similar in some aspects, but even later on, I still ended up curious enough again and wanted to see the rest of the layout. And yes, this means for a rarity, they actually grabbed my attention with that old "how did we get here" movie trope at the start. And finally getting the chance to finish it, I gotta say, this movie was a lot more clever than I was expecting. Clever with the writing and jokes, characters, tone, the casting, and while it might not be a hit all the time, the clever pacing in a handful of moments greatly enhances all these details too. Yeah, on the surface level, it might seem like the typical villain getting knocked around 6 ways from Sunday by the superhero, but there was a lot more planning in it than just that. Like, even if I could slightly tell Metro Man faked his death, I was expecting it would build up to him becoming a twist villain or something.
But this time, no!
But instead, he mostly just comes off as a narcissist who everyone respects and sometimes goes random for the lulz. And even then, he's shown layering through his absence by leaving his long legacy of eternal good doing behind to start up a new identity for himself.
Music Man was born.
Music Man?
That way I could keep my logo.
Cause of
Come
what?
again?
Yeah! Music Man!
Although we did sorta see a twist villain route through Titan, I'm sure we all know the old saying through Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And the difference here shows through Metro Man and Hal. Metro grew up with these powers and had the fortune to grow up with a civil family. And as a result, he likely learned a lot about responsibility and morale through his life. Meanwhile, Hal, someone with presumably far less discipline growing up, had these powers abruptly thrust on him. And Megamind, albeit via desperation, expected a similar morale with no setbacks. And speaking of, Megamind goes through his own route of fair growth too. While Metro Man's out of the picture, he learns how barren his life is without the hero around to preserve his goal and stopping him from getting everything he wants. And sure, we may have seen this kind of scenario play out in plenty of other forms before, but they play this out with the right balance of time length where there's a stable heft provided through characters' emotions and decisions going on. And Megamind's new directions are further shown and implied through the time he spends with Roxanne, as well as the small pointers he gets from Minnie and in between. The characters themselves may work great off each other, and we also have just as great a cast to thank here. Will Ferrell, David Cross, Tina Fey, Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill. Oh, and J.K. Simmons is back too.
I'm ready to re-enter society as a solid citizen.
If I ever find one of these lying around again, I swear to fucking God, I will stop being so polite. Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
Huh, look at that. And even with everything that came out of this movie, from the laughs to the cries, I can see why people would enjoy this after all this time, as I too am satisfied as I finally got to see how this all ends. And I can imagine those who fully grew up with this at the time wondered where a concept like this could go from here.
Thanks for saving us, Megamind. I'm sure the world will fondly remember your story, as well as whatever adventures you encounter in the future. Oh God, why did I open my mouth?
Oh, yeah, until we were given all that. Well, there may have been given an attempt, I think. But yeah, this was still an obvious fall from the original movie. I, for one, don't really plan to check this out anytime soon, unless there's enough interest from the audience. But regardless, this raises the question, will they ever try again to make another Megamind comeback after this? Because it could lead to a pretty uncertain outcome at this point. On one hand, I worry about what could come from this now if this is the level they're gonna go off of. But then again, it's not like they can do much worse by comparison. Right? Now let's close off this journey with probably one of the most unexpected, and yet one of the most impressive ideas they had in the legacy. The Prince of Egypt. Man, who would have guessed DreamWorks of all studios would make a movie from the Book of Exodus, or a Bible story in general? The thought alone can be pretty bold in some cases, but regardless, the execution on this was brilliant on so many levels. Certainly a huge save from whatever this was.
No! No!
With this being released during a fresh phase of the studio's early years, I can certainly understand why they'd want to make something to impress the public, especially when the only other title they had back then was this.
You know, I was gonna let you become part of my most erotic fantasies.
Huh?
The beloved 2D animation really shows all its glory here in so many scenes, bright or dark. And not only that...
We've prayed.
Oh, no way. Oh, sweet. This is a musical too? Oh, hell yeah. I am sold. But yeah, I've been partially familiar with some of these songs for years, and now after getting the full context and placement of these songs, I can really feel the power, heft, and energy that came off of them from both sides of the narrative. And that was just one of many parts that might have surprised many, especially if you've seen this in recent years. Naturally for DreamWorks, or probably any studio like them, you'd think they would have just resorted to padding or sugarcoating to make this more for the kids, and try to push this narrative into being more of a family picture. But they didn't. They deliver all the story beats and display a healthy portion of the weight that came from them enough to show what was at stake for everyone involved, no matter what scene they were going through. Whether it's with Moses and his journey toward redemption, Ramses struggling to survive all the plagues and the consequences for his actions, or the final conflict surviving the splitting of the sea. And in the scenes themselves, they also brought in a lot of recognizable and some surprisingly fitting members for the cast. Some include Patrick Stewart, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jeff Goldblum, Ralph Fiennes, and the late Val Kilmer as the star Moses, all of whom gave it their all for each of the characters and left us with quite a memorable telling. As for why I never saw this one in particular until now, well, I guess as a kid I just preferred how VeggieTales was presenting stories like these. And yeah, they have their own decent merit, but then you have something like this that displays the brutal, harrowing events that played out here with so much detail and feeling in it. Watching through, I felt like I got a ton out of this movie. From the unique visuals, which I hope they'll someday try again at some point, or the songs, or the comedy that thankfully never got that much in the way, or even the character designs and choices for actors, and above all else, there's especially the dedication to the source. I can definitely see why so many fellas would consider this one of the biggest crowning moments in DreamWorks' legacy. Well, just like before with my Disney trip, I gotta say, dear God, I slept like hell on so many of these titles growing up. Part of me can't even believe that I never had the interest to check out so many of these movies as a kid. And despite what I shared on this journey, the list still doesn't stop here. There are still plenty of other movies I missed out in many different points of my life, so I'll have to find the time and availability to try and get around to some more of those down the road, whether it's some of the older CG works or the remaining 2D movies. And yeah, I know why they mostly gave up on the traditional animated visuals back then. That was mainly due to the troubles they faced with Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas at the time. But who knows, maybe with enough interest from the public, they might someday take another crack at 1 or 2 more movies, just to see if they can breathe some new life into that older classic era. And even if they see it as just too much of a hazard in their budget, or they just don't feel like going into that direction ever again, then I'm sure they'll still be able to provide their audiences with a few decent, interesting stories with their CG visuals for the years to come. I mean, they did manage to find a uniquely sturdy balance with Puss in Boots' Last Wish, so maybe a similar success will come from some of their other movies later on. But like I always say at the end of these videos, we'll soon see, won't we?